He did it!
He won a hard-fought campaign, but the real work is still ahead for Marty Walsh. Boston's mayor-elect joins us for a wide-ranging conversation on everything from learning the nuts and bolts of city government to replacing the city's top cop and schools chief. That's ahead on a special edition of Greater Boston. Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Greater Boston. I'm Emily Rooney, along with Callie Crossley, host of WGBH Radio's Under the Radar.
We're joined tonight by Marty Walsh, just days before he's sworn in as Boston's 54th mayor. When he takes office, he'll face an array of challenges, some daunting, some nuisances.
All right, well, for the next half hour, we'll ask Marty how he plans to take on those issues as the city's first new mayor in decades. And with that, let me welcome you, Marty Walsh.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here.
It is. We're very happy to have you. So what has it been like for you just these past 6 weeks? What's the ramp up in like the texture of your life, the fabric of your life? And are you ready for some of these things, like even getting a driver?
It's been fast. It's been a lot of meetings, one after another. The first couple of weeks I was trying to meet with everybody that wanted to meet with me, people that worked in the campaign and people that didn't. And then I realized I couldn't do that. And there were hour-long meetings in the beginning. And then they went to half-hour meetings, and now they're 20-minute meetings, trying to meet with department heads and people who particularly, mostly around city government. I really haven't met with outside groups, really. But it's been fast, and it's probably what I expected, but it's a lot of thinking and a lot of really making decisions and understanding the decisions that I make now are decisions that I will have to live with for a while, at least a year or two, and making sure those decisions are the right decisions.
Are you going to get the driver or not?
Well, I think we do get you get a police detail,
yeah.
And that decision hasn't been finalized yet. So, well, I really focus that much on it.
Yeah.
I like driving, and you know, I've been told by the mayor many times that you're going to lose the ability to drive. And in the campaign, I didn't drive a lot because you're running from event to event. But losing that independence and that freedom a little bit it changes, and you think about it a lot.
Well, speaking of the differences between the campaign and now, the reality of being mayor, what did you hear on the campaign trail about city services, and what are you hearing now as you're having these special hearings with education and the transportation and really conversations about basic services?
Well, the basic services, you know, we didn't hear a lot of complaints. I mean, certain neighborhoods we heard complaints, but you know, in sitting down with the mayor's office and understanding how they set up their line for services for the community, particularly with the computer, it's interesting, and it seems to be very productive and very good. Some neighborhoods feel like they don't have the same connection to city services. So we're going to look and see where we can strengthen the city services, how we can better prepare the young people that work for the city that go out into the neighborhoods and neighborhood service coordinators. We're going to work on those. The school department, we hear a lot of issues around, you know, this new assignment plan that's coming down that's going to be implemented next year. We hear concerns about parents not being able to get into the schools in their neighborhoods. So you hear different things in different neighborhoods. And, you know, again, I'm looking forward to tackling those issues in January of how we move it forward. What we've been doing at the transition is going around the city, and we've been getting over 200 people roughly almost at every single transition meeting, which is exciting.
What's the thing that most irritates people about city services? You said you're not hearing that much, but what's the most irritating
thing? I think
thing?
people feel they're not connected to the government enough, and really with the transition, it's really people that might not call City Hall for services, but they feel like they don't have access. And these transitions have, I think, made people feel, empowered them to feel that they have access now to government. And the important piece for me is going to be once we're in office, how do we keep those discussions going from people that you don't normally see? They're not activists, they don't have issues, but they want to be part of government. The trick for me is going to be how do we keep these people engaged?
All right, well, one of the ways you're going to keep people engaged is the next time we have a snowstorm. Got to talk about it. People putting out the save the parking spaces with the chairs and everything. And we just had a snowstorm, and it wasn't a snow emergency, and people did it. So what are you going to do after you're in office and people do that?
Well, the last snowstorm, yes, I was actually over in East Boston the other day, and somebody had a chair on the spot, and I'm like, well, it's time to take the chair out. You know, as I said earlier, I got that question like the second day after I got elected, and I said I grew up in a three-family with no parking on the street, and I was kind of insinuating that, you know, we shovel the spot, you own the spot. And then when you're in certain parts of the city in South End, they're like, we don't save spots. So I have to figure out how I'm going to work it. But if you have a big storm and you shovel it out, it's your spot for a few days, in my opinion, if you shovel it out. But we have to really come up with an idea, because that's going to be like a crushing. That could make me or break me as mayor of the city of Boston.
Yeah. So, Marty, what did you make of yesterday's Boston Globe piece? They've been working on this thing for 4 months about the Boston Redevelopment Authority, and essentially saying that certain developers who have a good relationship with the mayor got a pass when it came to providing the required numbers of affordable housing units that usually come along with some of these sweetheart deals, and the fact that the board just rubber stamps anything that the mayor's office or the staff comes up with. Some of the people didn't even know what some of the things were in the thing that they were rubber stamping.
Yeah, one of the things I spoke about in the campaign, and it got suggested I'm going to blow up the BRA, and what I said is I'm going to make changes to the BRA, and part of that is around housing. I had a conversation with Sheila Dillon last week in the office, one of the transition discussions at D&D, and I spoke to her about how do we create more affordable housing and how do we create more workforce housing in the city of Boston. And they're really, in my time with the building trades, I knew there wasn't real consistency on when you're doing these developments in certain parts of Boston. Some would be able to do 15% affordable offsite, and others would have to be forced to build them on site. And it goes back to predictability, it goes back to transparency, and making sure that as we look into this, as I dive into this in January, I'm going to be looking at what justifies off-site, what justifies on-site. It has to be consistent. And I also think one of the issues in the campaign is really creating more housing for people throughout the city of Boston, not just low-income housing in one neighborhood.
But they were bypassing it. So
they were.
Did it surprise you? They said, wait a second, that was part of the deal. You make one of these.
What I'm going to do is we're going to do an audit of the BRA when we get in there, and we're going to audit all the departments to see what's there. I think there's been some frustration with the BRA over time with developers, with certain developers being able to move forward, other developers not being able to move forward. As far as I'm a proponent. I think if tax credits work to spark development, but in some developments people get tax credits, other ones people don't get tax credits. There has to be consistency there. The developers have to know predictability when they walk in, just like on the other side with the community. The community has to understand that, be explained that if somebody's going to come in and do a development in their neighborhood, and there's supposed to be 15% affordable on site, that means 15% affordable on site, not built in somebody else's neighborhood. And I think those are the issues. That I spoke about, and I put a plan together, a 14-point plan. Part of that is what we talked about. Part of that was in the article on Sunday about there's no consistency.
All right. Well, speaking of development, there was a classic photograph of you on the cover of the Herald back during the campaign, where it said basically that you were going to bulldoze City Hall. You still thinking about?
Have you been in there?
Oh yeah, many times.
You walk in there and you're like, how do you make it? First of all, when you walk to the front door, it doesn't invite you in. Go through the metal detector, it doesn't invite you in. As you walk around the floors, and I've done that, it's not. I don't think it's a healthy work environment for people. Never mind a good-looking one. And some departments have done some creative things in there. We're going to look at that, but also I'm committed to looking at what's going to happen in the future of City Hall. It's a very expensive piece of real estate in downtown Boston. If there's an opportunity for us to be able to capitalize on that, but create something new and special for the people of Boston, taxpayers, a new City Hall, I'm going to look at it. It's not. I haven't put it on the back burner. When I said it that day, I meant it. But walking around there, I'm like, how do you make it more inviting? You can see why. I walked around the building a couple times, and I've saw people, and they're excited to see me when I walk around. And I'm like, I got to do something about your space, because you really can't paint the concrete to make it look good. And when you look up, it's all concrete, and it's just how do you, and you go into some restaurants in Boston, and they don't do anything with the facade. They put the rough construction up, they paint it, it looks fabulous. I'm thinking, can we do that here, just to make it look like modern or something? I don't know, but we have to do something with it.
Well, one of the things you're going to have to deal with right away is the fallout from the City Council deciding to approve the Boston Police Department arbitration contract. Yeah. Were you surprised that it was passed, and you had said they should have gone back to the table?
I was surprised it was a 12-0 vote. You know, now that it's passed, it's behind the city, I guess, if you will, for now. There's 3 other police contracts that come up right behind that, and historically it's been the Boston Police Patrolman Association sets the bar. So we have to look at the other 3 police unions now and resolve those contracts. And as I said, historically it's always been they get the same rate. So we have to look and see if there's any room there. You know,
how do you get more room? It's $87 million.
No, I don't mean the room that way. I mean room the other way.
Okay.
You know, we have to. I'm going to be sitting down with those unions. If the mayor doesn't do it, I don't think the mayor's doing it right now. So I'll be sitting down with those unions right after the first of the year, right after the 6th of the year, to end those negotiations and get them moving forward. And then the fire is in arbitration again. And then I believe that's the only ones. EMTs are still out there. But other than that, then I think we're pretty much settled till 2016 when the next round of contracts come up. But, you know, in that contract, you know, I am looking forward to my first union negotiation. As crazy as that might sound, but it gives me the opportunity to be able to do what I said on the campaign trail and talk about how do we get to yes and try and come up with a very strong contract for the taxpayers of Boston, yet appreciate the men and women who work, whether it's public safety or public works in the city of Boston. In the budget, you know, there's potentially a $50 million shortfall this year in the budget. So that's a problem.
Yeah, because how do you pay for it?
You know, and we have to pay for it. So if there's a $50 million shortfall, you know, we have to cut services or cut something, lay people off. And I don't want to start that way. I like to move it forward, but it's early in the process, and I'm going to continue to move forward with it.
I have an idea for how you can pay for this. Payment in lieu of taxes, which is the institutions, hospitals, schools. 50% of Boston is tax-free property. A lot of it is state and federal and city. Yeah. I realize that, but about 20% of it is institutions like this one and hospitals and schools, and some of the offerings that these institutions gives, it's actually embarrassing, from zero to just several $100,000. And as you know, Mayor Menino went after them as best he could, but can you get people to come up with something other than these, frankly, measly few dollars that they offer? I
think it's fair to say yes. I mean, the mayor tried, and I haven't had a discussion with him about this, but if you have a college that's paying a fair amount of payment in lieu of taxes to the city of Boston, and you have another college that's not, well, that's clearly something that's not fair, or a museum for that matter. Mm-hmm. You know, the beauty about being a new mayor, and I think I'm seeing this now, is that I have an opportunity to kind of start fresh with a lot of these institutions. I sat down with college presidents in the last few weeks, and I sat down with the presidents of some of the major hospitals. The issue came up, and you know, a lot of them say, well, we do other things instead of the payments. And you know, I haven't seen what happens, but it's an opportunity here for a fresh start to really you know, close the gap in some cases, to make sure that if we're going to do payment in lieu of taxes, and one university at one size pays one set of figures, and someone who's similar in size pays something different, well, we have a problem there. So we have to make it.
Excuse me, Partners is one of the ones who got a good deal, and now they're talking about moving all their administrative offices to Somerville.
They're not talking; they're out.
You can't reverse that?
No, I understand. They signed a contract the other day with Somerville, which is disappointing because there's 4,500 jobs. Partners is a big piece of the city of Boston, and I know that they worked hard to keep them here. My concern is what's their plan. I mean, usually when you have a company like Partners, what's your next step? It's not usually a one step; it's usually a several step process. So I'm going to be sitting down with Partners to talk to them about, you know, what's their future here.
All right, so promises on the campaign trail, now payment comes due.
Yeah, payment in lieu of taxes.
The Inclusive Boston Alliance, that's a mass vote, the Urban League of Massachusetts, Eastern Massachusetts, NAACP. It's a whole host, a 15-group umbrella group of folks saying they have a scorecard for you.
My scorecard.
100 days, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. They are looking to see if you're going to fulfill your promises around diversity. Are they looking specifically for you to fill the jobs of the police department, head of the police department, and the school superintendent?
Well, they haven't asked me, but you know, those are all jobs that are high profile, and people are certainly looking at them. The superintendent, we will be doing a search at some point down the road as far as superintendent for schools. Police department, I made a commitment to make sure that the upper echelon of the police department is 50% people of color. Also going to work with the fire department, and not just those departments, but throughout the city of Boston. There are 64 department heads in the city of Boston, and from what I understand, roughly 4 people of color out of the 64. So we're looking at all across the board. I think the first score I should be based on is my transition team. and I think we have about 240 members of transition throughout all the different areas. And
so by that score, you're ahead.
We're ahead. I think I'm at 48 to 51% people of color. So, that's kind of the first preview of what type of administration I'm going to run, and we made sure that we covered what we wanted to do, and not just simply putting people on transition. These are people that are vested in different areas of government that are very important. So that's the first step. The next step is going to be as I'm building the office on the 5th floor of City Hall, and what's my office going to look like, and then I'm putting a lot of people that are leaving in the departments. I'm putting interim appointments for now. I'm not, you can't start day one with 64 department heads and the cabinet and everything all set up. I'm not rushing into it. I'm going to put interim people in, so as we make some adjustments and changes in those departments, we'll find the best qualified people for those jobs to be able to move our city forward.
All right, so here's something that you said about the Boston schools in a debate. Let's take a listen.
Yeah. We also need an administrator that can attract good talent to our city to teach. In the school systems in Boston, we have a 89% children of color school system. We have 21% teachers African American and 16% Latino teachers. We need a superintendent who understands those challenges.
So that sounds like a promise to me.
Well, that's a promise.
Okay.
Well, that's a promise.
Person of color.
Oh, yeah, no, we're moving on it. It's a promise. I mean, and it's absolutely a promise that's going to help move our system forward as well. It's not just a promise to promise we're going to put a superintendent of color or work on putting more teachers of color in there. That's a promise that has to happen, and it's more than a promise. It's something that I feel will move our system forward, and I think that makes a big difference. One of the concerns on the trail a lot, particularly around the schools, was that the lack of teachers of color teaching kids of color. And not having that consistency, that understanding, and that's something that I committed to, and I'm going to move forward on.
Got any names you want to put out?
Yeah, I was going to say, you want to break any news here today?
Actually, on the school searches, we're going to look nationwide, and the only concern I have about nationwide search is the fact that we have many school districts, major school districts open. And everyone's looking at the same time. I think New York is open. LA might be open. There's Cincinnati. These are big cities comparable to us. Some are bigger than us. My concern is, but we can attract them. We have a better draw. I think people would rather be in Boston than New York or something like that. So I'm going to use the strength of Boston to attract the best.
What about department heads? You've got like 64 of them. Do you know how many of those you're going to keep?
I was supposed to do that. I was supposed to put the list down yesterday, and I didn't do it yesterday because I had to go Christmas shopping a little bit. But no, I'd say probably percentage-wise, I'm not sure if it's probably 30 or 40% have informed me that they're leaving, they're moving on, and so we'll trim. Another, 20-30% have asked to stay, and then I'm still doing interviews on it.
All right, so the arts community is thrilled with you because you are going to name a cabinet-level person to concentrate on, and most importantly, a dedicated revenue stream, which is coming out a line item in the city budget. Now, we just talked about that $87 million and a $50 million budget shortfall. How's that going to work?
Well, we're going to put a line item in there. What the advocates are looking for was a % of the budget. I don't know if it'll be a % of the budget, but it's certainly going to be, there'll be money in that line item, because if we're going to create this position, which we are, we need an office and support staff around that person. I'm also looking at potentially in other areas of the cabinets, not the cabinets, but the departments, maybe merging some departments together, see what makes sense putting together for cost savings and be able to make adjustments there.
So the revenue would come from there.
So the revenue would come from there. But I'm absolutely committed to that, and I'm going to do that because it's important. And, one of the things that wherever we debated or had a forum and arts came up, 50% of the heads in the audience nodded when we talked about arts, whether it was in the primary or the final. And since then, people are really excited about it. And, I was in New York last week and talking to them about what they do with their arts, and it's pretty exciting. And it's a revenue generator. And I think we can capitalize as a city on that. And also around tourism, which is separate. On tourism, we can capitalize on tourism too. People are excited about it, and I think that's a way for us to bring in revenue into the city.
I think it's important to note that it's not a charity case, because Mayor Menino has said that put together all the sports teams and arts brings in more money.
It does. Art is the, I think, number 2 or 3 largest generator of revenue in the city of Boston. And when you really arts and tourism, I mean, sometimes the advocates don't like the arts and tourism together, but we'll throw them for this discussion. But there is real opportunity, real possibility here to really capitalize on it. And, you know, in the arts, I mean, when you look across the line, even in the schools, a lot of schools don't have art programs. And that's another area that we want to be able to do. I've talked to the museums, Children's Museum, does some outstanding things here in the city of Boston. Museum of Fine Arts lost some money, I think, last year, but, you know, we got to work with them to help them build up.
All right, on the other end of the spectrum, casinos.
Ooh.
So Revere is still in the hunt for this, and which means is that huge parcel of land in Boston, Suffolk Downs, is going to be left with nothing yet. Have you talked to Revere Mayor Dan Rizzo about still being a host community? Is there any way for Boston to get a piece of the action, literally a piece of the revenue? There
is, and the issue here, in both for Everett and for Revere, impacts Boston, whether it's to Charlestown or East Boston. So what happens in the case, the way the legislation is written, Charlestown could still be deemed a host community and they could have a vote on it. East Boston already had a vote, voted it down. There's a new vote in September, which will have Revere as the host community. Boston will be possibly deemed as what's called a surrounding community. So the mayor's office, right now, the mayor currently has the ability to enter into what's called a surrounding community agreement and get benefits to the community. The advocates in East Boston who are opposed to a casino, I don't think are in favor of Boston entering into that agreement. I have not really made a public statement on it, and I'm going to probably right now. You know, I think it's important for Boston to enter into potentially a surrounding community agreement just to protect us, because if we don't, then it goes to an arbiter, and the arbiter will tell us in Boston what we get. Doesn't mean I'm supportive of it. I said on the campaign trail, and I said even when I supported the legislation on Beacon Hill, whatever the community decides, the community decides. And the community of East Boston decided against the casino, so I stand with the community of East Boston. To protect Boston, however, I think it's important for us to look at the surrounding community agreement. The thing that's concerning about both of those casino proposals is they're literally 2 or 3 feet away from Boston. You know, the line where they're being built on is 2 or 3 feet away. So we're going to feel the impacts. And, you know, if it is built and the commission does approve it, I'm not sure what legal right we have to stop it as a city. But if it does get built down the road, I want to make sure that Boston has the benefits, or some benefits of that, the impact of what's going to happen.
One of the things that people are concerned about, the neighbors, and one of the reasons a lot of people voted it down, was because fear of more crime being brought into other neighborhoods. During your victory speech, you addressed a lot of issues, and one of them was the state of crime in Boston. Here's a little of what you had to say.
And yes, crime statistics have gone down, but we continue to lose too many young people to senseless gun violence. We have to do better than that. We can and we will.
How do you do better, Marty? As you know, Mayor Menino was dogged on this issue. You've said you wanted to establish an Office of Recovery Services, which would go into the schools, find at-risk youth before they get to the point where they're shooting people and taking drugs. But how do you do that when cities all over America have the same problem?
That's part of the solution right there. And another part of the solution is treating the trauma. And we haven't done that. And I mentioned it on the campaign trail very early on, and since that time people have talked about it. You know, when a soldier comes back from Iraq or Afghanistan and they witness some horrible incidents that happen there, and some have lost friends, if they don't go for treatment, then PTSD sets in, and then their life just spirals. When they do go for treatment, they're able to kind of get ahead of the curve and get the treatment they need in the counseling. In Boston, when a young person witnesses a murder or hears about a murder in a neighborhood or just lives in a neighborhood that there's high crime, they don't get treated for the trauma. And I think part of it's treating for the trauma. Over the campaign, there was a young man that got shot in Uplands Corner area. And I went to his girlfriend's house and to pass along my condolences. And I sat on the curb outside afterwards talking to a friend of mine that was there. And I was watching the young people come in and out of the house. And the first, and I made a judgment here, but a lot of these kids were probably thinking, first thought is, how do we avenge his death? Rather than having counselors sit down and talk to these young people and say, listen, there's another way. Rather than trying to get somebody back. Because what happens, a lot of these shootings, they're retribution, and they go back generations. Meaning, you know, it's like, you shot my cousin, I'm going to shoot your brother, you shot my brother, I'm going to shoot your cousin and your friend. And it's just, we have to deal with the trauma piece of it. That's one piece of it. Education's another piece. Substance abuse is another piece. You know, I remember, I represent Dorchester, and I remember talking to Captain Claiborne one time. And I always was under the impression that gang members, when they shot each other, they were high. And he said, they're not. I said, what do you mean they're not? He goes, it's over a piece of sidewalk or respect. And so when you have young people shooting people because of a piece of sidewalk, well, we have to get in and get to the root of it. At least if it was over drugs or alcohol, you would understand that they have an addiction problem. We could figure it out. So we have to do that. It's not a simple solution, but it's something that I'm going to tackle, as I said that night and saying today.
Here's the wrap on you. Nice guy, maybe too nice, a people pleaser. And we wonder, can you get tough?
Oh, I can get tough. I can get tough. And that was asked in the campaign, too. I certainly get tough. If people that know me know I can get tough. You know, I like to help people, and I like to try and get to yes. But when I have to make tough decisions, I'll make tough decisions. There's no question about that. I've done it. Some of my friends that are listening tonight are probably laughing at your question to me.
Okay.
So the great line that people like to quote back at Mayor Menino is that he said when he was first elected, judge me and judge me harshly by the quality of Boston public schools at the end of my term. How should we be judging you?
At the end, I'll tell you on the 6th. I'm not sure yet. I mean, you know, it's kind of one of those things that the question came up a lot. What do you want your legacy to be? What, you know, and you know, I haven't thought through that. I mean, I'm not concerned about what my legacy is. What I want to do is make sure I do a good job as mayor of the city of Boston for the people of Boston. I want to make sure that what I've spoke about on the campaign trail are just not empty promises. I want to make sure that I'm able to succeed on a lot of things I promised. I'm going to outline I'll outline in my inauguration my first 100 days, and then I'll outline my plans, what I want to accomplish in my first year, and move on from there. You know, I don't want to box myself in and say, judge me on this or judge me on that. I just want to be able to make Boston a better place for a lot of people. Boston's a great city. I mean, there's some great things happening here. I just want every neighborhood to have that opportunity.
All right, just on one nuisance issue, the Callahan Tunnel is going to be closing. I think it's December 27th. I was getting nervous about that.
That happened on the old administration.
I never even the Callahan Tunnel, and I was getting nervous about it. But I mean, another 30,000 cars whipping through some of the back streets.
Yeah, I think we'll be fine.
You ready for that?
Yeah, I think we'll be fine. I think people are.
The Longfellow's closed.
People are worried about it. We survived the Big Dig. If we survived the Big Dig, we can survive anything.
Well, but it was hard.
But it's not the Big Dig. I mean, you know, somebody said to me, well, what are you going to do about it? I said, well, it's leaking. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, it's either that, keep it open, and someday, you know, the Atlantic comes crashing down. I think we have to just, you know, we'll have to adjust to it. I went through it this weekend. I went through the Callahan. You take the Ted Williams a lot. I think the impact's going to be on East Boston again. You're going to have 30,000 more cars going into Eastie. That's going to make it difficult. I think coming out, you'll be okay. There's plenty of off, you know, Southie or through Boston. You'll be able to make it. I think the impact's going to be on Bennington Street in East Boston, and when you go down Route 1, getting out, that's where the impact's going to be felt.
All right. Well, we are looking forward to your inauguration on January 6th, and wondering if you think the next month we'll be seeing the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
I love the Patriots.
That was a slight hesitation.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, last week against the Dolphins, I thought the season was over, and then they come back and score 41 points, whatever they did last night. So I'd love to see the Patriots in the Super Bowl. You know, particularly because if they win it, that means I'm the mayor and they won the Super Bowl. And I'm a season ticket holder, so you know, I'd be down there for at least the AFC Championship game, maybe. But no, I'd love to see the Patriots. I'm not sure. I think that they're hurt so bad. The defense and their offensive, the receivers are hurt. They could make it. Belichick is a fabulous coach, the best in history as far as I'm concerned, and Tom Brady is one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, so I think they could do it.
Marty Walsh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
For this half hour. It's been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that does it for this special edition of Greater Boston. If you missed part of this interview or want to watch it again, visit our website, WGBHnews.org. And I also want to thank Callie Crossley for joining me here tonight. And thank you for watching. I'm Emily Rooney. Have happy holidays.